on cases. So as of yesterday, total 439 cases in the city of Syracuse. That's 48% of the total cases in Onondaga County. It is the highest case rate in Onondaga County. And as we've heard from the county executive, that's largely being driven by proactive testing, specifically in our congregate living facilities, a number of which are located here in the city of Syracuse. So with that kind of concentration of facilities, we are seeing the city's numbers go up. But again, with that proactive testing, we are more aggressively seeking out the virus and getting a better handle on the actual case rate here in the city of Syracuse. Countywide cases, again, as of yesterday, 920. Active cases, 326. Recoveries, 561. And deaths, 33. As we talked about last week, virtually all city services are continuing. We have had to make some modifications. We have city workers working remotely, quite a bit of them, and of course many essential workers that are still out throughout the city, and I want to acknowledge them and thank them and just encourage everyone to support them as they continue to do their jobs. Throughout this process, our priority continues to be to respect and protect our essential workers. These are the individuals that have been on the front lines from the beginning, that there has been no pause for, and have gotten up and gone out and done their job every day and done it extremely well. And even as we face these very difficult decisions, our priority is going to be to continue to respect and protect those essential workers. Some updates on just some data that we're tracking on specific city services. Trash collection, as you can see, even with the pause, trash collection, the total trash that we're collecting in tonnage is about the same. So that's something we're going to continue to monitor. But in the meantime, I do want to acknowledge our sanitation and recycling workers in TPW that again have been out there every day making sure that our city continues to be clean and healthy and safe. Water usage, another data point that we're tracking. Water usage is slightly down. Again, it's far too early to extrapolate any kind of true insight out of these trends, but it's data that we're going to continue to track over a long period of time and hopefully learn from. But it is slightly down through the course of this crisis, and I want to use this as an opportunity just to again reiterate that the COVID-19 virus poses no risk to our water supply. We continue to have ample supply of fresh, clean water from Alicea Lake, and that will continue. I want to acknowledge all the employees in the water department that have ensured that we continue to get fresh and clean water. We've talked a lot about the impact of this pandemic on crime, and that's something that we're watching very closely. Chief Buckner's here and can answer specific questions as they come up. But just to give you an idea, we talked about a downward trend of Part 1 crimes through the pandemic, and we've seen that continue and even accelerate over this past year. So last week, when I updated you all, we were at an overall 7% increase in Part 1 crime compared year over year, but had been trending downward. You can see that in the chart. The numbers have continued to trend downward, and that we had a significant downward slide this past week. So we went from overall crime being up 7% down to 2%. And if you dig down a little bit deeper, you see a significant decrease in violent crime. So year over year, we have a 15% decrease in violent crime. And property crime, which continues to be a challenge, is only up 6% at this point. So that ends up with a total 2% year over year increase in crime, but a downward trend that we hope will continue. And you can see even in the calls for service, we're actually down year over year by 4%. We won't get into them in detail, but we also, this information we track weekly in the police department CompStat reports, and we also look at 5-year averages, and it's just good, helpful context to see Part 1 crime overall today versus our 5-year average. We've seen a 19% decline in Part 1 crime. So those are encouraging statistics, ones that we want to continue as we get out of this pandemic, but something that we're going to continue to track and share. We've also been updating everyone on calls, police calls specifically for social distancing related issues. So as of, I believe yesterday, we've had 911 has referred 416 calls to the Syracuse Police Department regarding the executive order on public gatherings. 56 of those 416 were businesses. So those calls do continue to come in. The police department continues to respond to everyone. And in the few cases where we do have a violation that needs to be addressed, we file reports with the New York State Attorney General's office. Last week, I believe we reported 5 of those reports being submitted. We're up 1 more this week to 6 reports filed with the State Attorney General's office. Also tracking our fire and EMS calls. As was the case last week, fire calls are about the same. EMS calls continue to be down. So that's something we're going to continue to follow. This one is new and kind of fun and interesting, I think, given the new normal or the now normal that we're all dealing with. A lot of us are spending a lot more time on Zoom and WebEx. For the City of Syracuse, our online virtual meeting tool is WebEx, and we've been pulling some data from WebEx. And the big one is we are averaging 253 online meetings per week in the City of Syracuse. So those are city department meetings, council meetings, overall 253 meetings per week. And if you just average that, if you do the average based on the 5 work days, that's about 50 meetings per work day. So if there is any question about whether or not city government is operating, we are, for sure. And we're going to continue to follow those numbers and share them. It's important that people know that we are continuing to work even though we are not necessarily all in this building. And another related statistic, we actually, the number of participants is growing. So from 4 weeks ago, our average was about 5 people per meeting. Now it's up to 7.1. I will qualify that with, I call myself sometimes a professional meeting attender. Having a meeting doesn't always equate to productivity, so I think we need to continue to remind ourselves of that. But again, I think it's a testament to the dedication of all of the city employees and the counselors that they continue to operate the people's business. Along those same lines, permits. I think that maybe there's an assumption that since New York has gone on pause that there hasn't been any investment or activity going on. There has been. Not surprisingly, the permit number has dropped, but it hasn't stopped. If you look at the chart we have in front of you, requests are at 82% of the volume that they were at this time last year. So it is down again, as to be expected. But still, this year, over 1,000 permits issued, which says that people are continuing to invest in preparing and planning for what comes after pause. So that's encouraging, and again, a testament to our permit staff who has incorporated a lot of new technologies, doing a lot more remote permit reviewing, and we are really pleased that they've been able to keep things moving. I talked about some of that innovation. I want to talk a little bit more about it. So right now, the way in which we're doing permits, we are meeting by appointment only with safety precautions in place in the permit office. Some of you may have seen a story recently about a local tech company named Density that tracks people moving in and out of spaces. It doesn't record the video, it just tracks the number of individuals. And through a partnership with Density, we were able to affix sensors in our permit office so we could begin tracking activity throughout the day. So as an example, it's a little hard to see on the slide here, but on April 27th, for example, between 3 and 4 o'clock, we know that 18 people came through our permit office. And I think as we all think about what a restart and a reopening looks like, and more attention is paid towards how many people are in specific spaces, I think this type of technology is going to become increasingly important, and we're really proud to be on the cutting edge of it, both through Density themselves and through our partnership in working with the permit office. I talked last week about yard waste, something that we've heard a lot from our constituents who missed our pause on yard waste and construction debris pickup. We are resuming this weekend. So for all city residents that live in the northeast quadrant, on May 2nd and 3rd, we will be picking up yard waste and construction debris. And moving forward, each week we will move into the subsequent quadrant. So next weekend, southeast quadrant, following southwest, and then northwest. Also, you may start to see another familiar image that we've missed for a little while, and that is our gotcha Syracuse Sink bikes. When we initially began to shut things down, as has always been the case, our priority has been the health and safety of our constituents. And while we acknowledge that our bike share program is another form of transportation for those that may not have their own vehicle or other options, we weren't confident that we could ensure the health and safety of those of the users of the bike share program. So we worked with the company. They pulled the bikes. They put together a new plan to ensure that they could institute a new cleaning protocol and ensure the health and safety of users. So we are slowly starting to redeploy those bikes. We're starting with about 100 bikes in some of the bike hubs that we've already established, and we're actually trialing 3 new temporary hubs in Upper Onondaga Park, Burnett Park, and Sunnycrest Park. We talked last week about in some of our parks where we've closed the loop roads to vehicular traffic on the weekends. That's been very popular. It's been a way in which we've been able to account for the increased usage in our parks and allow for more social distancing for people that are exercising. And so we thought that was a logical place to trial these new bike hubs. So you can look for those out in our parks. And again, with the new protocol, we are confident that they are safe and clean. Just one more point I wanted to make on our parks. So there is some new guidance coming out that you'll see in parks throughout Onondaga County. We want everyone who goes to a park to bring their mask. There are cases where social distancing is, in most cases, is possible, and in those cases, if you're running, if you're riding a bike, you don't have to have the mask on as long as you are appropriately distanced from people. But we want you to have your mask with you, so in the case where you might have to walk past someone or you run into somebody that you know, you can put your mask on quickly and make sure that everyone's safe. So let's talk about the fiscal impact. You've heard me talk a lot about it. We've spent a lot of time talking with the council about it, and the council, of course, is having their own discussions. It's something that's extremely important, particularly as we work through our budget process for fiscal year 2021. Just some general guidelines in terms of our approach as we're managing our fiscal impact. Number one is that we are continuing to monitor and adjust to the changing landscape. As I said, from the moment I delivered the budget to the council, the landscape is changing rapidly. Therefore, the numbers and the projections are going to change rapidly, and we need to be in a position where we can be flexible and account for those changes and do it in a collaborative way. And I'm very pleased to say, as the council heads into next week into a budget vote, I feel really good about the level of communication and collaboration that's happening between the administration and the council around managing the changes with the budget as well as with overall spending. We are taking specific actions to reduce city spending and costs. When we put the budget together, we did look to the fund balance to provide some short-term relief for the negative impact that we're going to have. But I want to be clear that while the fund balance is in place for a reason, it's what we call the rainy day fund. As I've said before, it is indeed raining. It is not a sustainable solution for operating city government. And so while we are looking to the fund balance this year to provide some temporary short-term relief, that it is our intention to preserve and protect our fund balance. Up until this point, I'm very proud of the work that the administration and the council have done to get the city of Syracuse on a path to fiscal sustainability. Before this crisis hit, we were projecting a $1.5 million surplus in the fiscal year 2020 budget. Together, we have begun to turn the ship around with city finances, and we want that to continue, and we believe it will continue. But we have to get through this crisis, and that is going to cause for some difficult decisions. But our full intention is to continue to stay on that path and continue to deliver the services that our constituents pay for and that they deserve, and not only provide those services at an adequate level, we want to continue to improve those services. So we look at what we're going through right now as a temporary state and something that we will have to manage and get through together. But we, as quickly as we can, are going to get back on that path to fiscal sustainability and continue to improve the way in which we deliver services. Some data in terms of the fiscal impact, and we get a lot of questions about property taxes. So this will give you this chart gives you a little insight into what we're seeing so far with property tax collection. And what you can see is that people are still paying their property taxes, not at the same rate they were last year. This time last year, we were at an 86.5% property tax collection rate. Right now, we are at 78.3%. So, for understandable reasons, that collection rate is down, but people are continuing to pay their property taxes, and that is certainly appreciated because it is those same taxes that that support the services that we're delivering that everyone has become accustomed to. As to the question of what we can do to mitigate the impact of property tax payments on our constituents, people have asked, can we defer them? Can we put them off? Can we stop them? The short answer is that the only way we can adjust our property tax deadlines and fees is through state action. There is a bill pending right now with the legislature that is contemplating that, but that's the only way that happens. What we've been focused on is looking at ways in which we can account for some delays in those payments. The way in which we can control that right now is for anyone that's in a tax trust payment plan. So for people that have had a hard time paying their taxes, have worked with us to enter into a payment plan. When we went on pause, extended the deadline for those tax trust payments in both March and April. So right now the deadline for tax trust payments is May 15th. But we are having conversations with the council and our team on the administration to look at what other potential modifications we can make to our tax trust process to account for some additional challenges in property tax payments. But at this point, those are the only changes that we're considering. And as you can see, the vast majority of people are doing the right thing and paying those property taxes that we need to deliver those essential services. Sales tax revenue, we've talked a lot about that. Sales tax revenue is our largest revenue source. And given the nature of this crisis, is the most vulnerable to being impacted by the pause, and it has been significantly. So what you're looking at here is just the difference over the past couple fiscal years. So to give some context, in fiscal year 2019, we collected $89.3 million in sales tax payments. The difference between what we budgeted for in sales tax receipts and what we now project we will collect by the end of fiscal year 2020, which ends at the end of June, is $13.4 million. So we are projecting a $13.4 million sales tax revenue decline just in fiscal year 2020, which is again what we're in right now. So that's actually where we are anticipating the most significant hit on our sales tax revenue. But we do expect that to carry on to fiscal year 2021. And so right now, and again, this is just sales tax, not all of our revenue. We are projecting a loss of $10.7 million in sales tax revenue in fiscal year 2021. Again, it's a moving target, and we're going to continue to track it, but that gives you a sense of how hard we're being hit just on this one revenue source. It is devastating to city finances. Our second largest revenue source is state aid. Currently, in recent years, the amount of state aid that we received is $71.8 million. That is what's currently in the state budget now. We've been advocating for years for that number to go up. It hasn't gone up in nearly a decade. But given the financial constraints that the state themselves are seeing, we've appreciated the governor and the legislature's willingness to hold us harmless on state aid. As we've heard recently, as the state is adjusting to their own budget crunch, The governor has floated out the possibility of at least a 20% across the board cut on state aid to municipalities. You can see in front of you here how devastating that would be for the city of Syracuse. We would go from $71.8 million to $57.4 million. That's just on a 20% cut, which is over $14 million lost. So you think about the impact of our sales tax revenue loss. You compound that with the possibility of a state aid cut, which some are suggesting could even be higher than 20%. And you begin to see how difficult and how challenging this fiscal situation is for the city of Syracuse. So what are we doing about it? A few things. In fiscal year 2020, which again goes through the end of June, I mentioned the 104 employees that we placed on unpaid administrative leave. To give you a little breakdown of that group, the largest two groups of employees within that group, that list of 104, are crossing guards. And as you can imagine, with schools closed, our crossing guards have not been able to work since that point. And our Parks and Recreation staff that specifically staffs our recreation programs, including aquatics, which are not currently operating. We have not made any final decisions on our summer recreation and programming. We have advised those employees that unless they hear from us otherwise, that leave is in place until the end of July. But in the case that we do make some decisions in the Parks Department, whether it be related to pools, whether it would be related to specific camps, we do reserve the right to bring those employees back before that time. And we have made it clear to those employees that we do intend for this to be temporary. These are hardworking employees that we care very much about and do really important work for the city. But as we started to look at how we could begin to mitigate the costs, the revenue losses that we talked about, this became a decision that we couldn't avoid. It's important to note that we expect that these 104 employees will be eligible for New York State unemployment insurance as well as the expanded federal benefit. But we understand that even with that, it's still going to cause a lot of hardship and anxiety for those individuals, their families, and also for our existing workforce. And we're certainly thinking of that at this difficult time. I also want to mention that we have also announced that we'll be freezing all non-essential spending effective today, May 1st. So trying to mitigate the financial impact as we close out fiscal year 2020. So all non-essential spending in the city of Syracuse will be frozen, and we'll work with departments to work through the challenges that will undoubtedly pose. Going into fiscal year 2021, we talked a little bit about some of this. We've assembled a financial contingency committee that includes representatives from the administration, as well as the county council. Our finance chair, Councilor Rudd, is participating, as are some private sector partners. The purpose of that group is to sit down to look at the best and worst case scenarios going forward into fiscal year 2021 and help us to develop a number of contingency reduced spending plans. And depending on the severity of the loss, those spending plans will have to contemplate changes in staffing levels and frequency of service. These are things that we do not want to do. We hope we don't have to do, but we have to plan for as the situation continues to unfold. Again, also very much committed to working with the county council as we get through the budget process, which we'll have more to talk about next week. So where do we go from here? What is our commitment to our constituents in the midst of this crisis? One, we are going to continue to push for federal aid for municipalities and specifically for the city of Syracuse. That is the only way in which we can avoid making some more of the extremely difficult decisions that we've talked about here. And it's the right thing to do. As I've stated, our federal delegation has been rock solid in their support, led by Senator Schumer, who tried to work it into the last stimulus bill. Senator Gillibrand, I've spoken with, is very much supportive, and Congressman Cackle I talk to regularly. and he's been rock solid as well. So we do have that going for us, but we don't have a federal stimulus bill yet that includes aid for the City of Syracuse. And just to give some context, and it's not limited to the City of Syracuse, Onondaga County, as you know, hearing from County Executive McMahon, is facing the very same fiscal challenges. They rely just as much as we do on sales tax revenue. And to give you a sense of why we feel this is so important and why we feel it's fair, as you may recall, in the CARES Act, when that was passed, we were advocating for the federal government to lower the population threshold for support. That threshold was at 500,000 people. So to put that in perspective, the population in Onondaga County is 460,000 and change. Head down the thruway to Rochester, they are over that 500,000 threshold. So what does that mean? What did that mean for the CARES Act? It meant that Monroe County received $140 million to mitigate the impact of COVID-19 on their communities, and Onondaga County received $0. That's not fair. It doesn't make sense. It's an arbitrary number, and we need to work with our federal colleagues, our federal delegation, and the federal government overall to right that wrong. We need this funding. I've said it many times, I'll say it again. Local governments are the foundations of communities. All of these essential services that we're talking about. Chief Buckner's here, the police officers that are out there every day responding to calls. Chief Mons is here, our firefighters that are going out, that are putting out fires, that are responding to EMS calls, putting themselves in danger. These are the frontline workers. These are the essential workers that we're talking about. Forget about blue state or red state. Forget about how we're managing our finances. I will talk all day long about the work that we've done to achieve fiscal sustainability in the City of Syracuse. And again, I feel that we are very much on that path. We can debate that. We can talk about best fiscal management practices. What there is no debating is how important these essential workers are to our communities. And that's what's at stake here with the federal government, and that's why we need this support. Related to that, I talked about the fund balance, and again, that's there for a reason. When we go out to borrow, that's something that our bond rating agencies look at. We work very hard to preserve that fund balance, which now sits at around $50 million. And while we are looking to draw from it to account for some of the losses in the next fiscal year, that is not a sustainable solution and not something that we intend to continue to do. Last but not least on this topic, you've heard all the difficult discussions and decisions that we're considering. What we are not considering is bankruptcy. Any suggestion that we consider bankruptcy, as far as I'm concerned, is as ludicrous as a suggestion that any state pursues bankruptcy. It's not an option. It's not something that is under any consideration in this building, nor is the idea of a fiscal control board. We have controlled our fiscal destiny. The folks in this room, the county council, the administration, we have put ourselves on this path to fiscal sustainability. We have and will continue to control our own destiny. Under no circumstances do we see a fiscal control board being a viable option for the City of Syracuse, or a necessary one, as long as we get the relief that we need. Last point before I turn it over to Council President to share some thoughts. On the topic of federal aid, I talked about the importance of population as it relates to the formulas that drive funding. What does that bring me back to? The census. Everyone in our community needs to fill out their census form. You can see on the map in front of you, we have a high concentration of what are considered hard to count populations in our community. And when you look at the lighter areas in this map, those are our hard to count communities. We need everyone to rally to not only make sure you fill out your own census, to talk to your family and friends and make sure they fill out their census, and to do anything else within your power to encourage everyone to fill out their census. The good news is when we reported last week, we were at a 41.3% self-response rate. Today, we are at 43.2%. We are headed in the right direction. We're still far below the state average of 48.5 and even more so the county average of 58.2. Again, that's largely due to the fact that we have a high concentration of hard-to-count populations. Again, it's critically important. This is something that everyone can do. For everyone that's asked, how can I help? How can we help? This is a way that you all can help. So I want to be sitting back here this time next week to be able to report a number significantly higher than 43.2. So there's your challenge, Syracuse. And from what I've seen so far, you've all stepped up every step of the way, so I expect that to continue. Council President Hudson, we'd love to hear from you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First, I want to say thank you to my colleagues and administration, because we all know that when we went on this pause, it was very unexpected. So I'm not going to go back to the economic and financial hardships we're looking at. I'm going to talk about the human aspect of it. Because I received a phone call last night. I lost a childhood friend with COVID. So within the last week, there has been 3 COVID deaths in our community. So I just want to thank the community, because you didn't take it lightly. When we asked you to pause, you paused, the majority of us. So I'm hoping that we can continue, because guess what? We all want to open up the world and come back out. But right now, it's not safe. Right now, we're trying to keep our community as healthy as we can to ensure that once we really open back up, that we'll open back up. We know with not all of our residents, but with the majority of our residents. So I just wanted to put that out there, and I just want to ask the community to continue to work with us on pausing, because that's the only way we're going to be able to move forward and to move our city forward. And while I'm talking, I want to just talk about your city councilors. We've been working since the pause. With the City of Syracuse, we have taken 62 WebEx calls, and I'm web now, but we've done 62 WebEx committee meetings to continue to do the people's business. And with the 62 meetings, it's roughly about 300 hours online. So that's not a small feat, because I'm technically challenged, but I managed to make it work, and as well as all of my colleagues. So we have been working diligently along with the administration. And what I'm going to ask you is, as a community, on May 5th, we're doing our budget hearing at 5 p.m. On May 4th, at 5 p.m. We need your input. We're not trying to work in a silo, because all of these meetings were public. They're all on our website. All you have to go on, you look, you come into the WebEx, and you can join our meetings. We need you to be a part of this, because I know you've heard quite a few people say we're all in this together. In reality, we are all in this together. And for Syracuse to come back out the way we went in, is going to take us as a community working really, really hard to ensure that we keep everyone safe in our city.
Great. Thank you, Council President. I'll say it again, the council, the way in which they've been able to pivot, leave this room, but not leave their duties and their work. I've gotten to know pretty much what all their houses look like right now. They're spending a lot of time on WebEx, and we really appreciate it. We couldn't do it without you. The Council President's points on restart were a great transition to the last point that I wanted to make on restart. There's been a lot of discussion about restart, reopening. Last week I talked about not thinking of it as flipping a switch, but as loosening and tightening a valve. That's something that we continue to talk about and look at. I want to reiterate that up to this point, we have been, and going forward, we've been in lockstep with County Executive McMahon and his team, our regional partners, and Governor Cuomo, and that the health data, the public health data, has to continue to drive the decision making. And thanks to the hard work of a lot of folks around the region, and certainly the governor and his team, we now have some metrics that we can use to gauge how ready we are for a restart, and even then how we can phase it in a safe way. We have a number of folks working on different levels of it. So as you recall, one of the first things that the county executive and I did in partnership with Center State CEO and NACNE is we established the Economic Resiliency Task Force. So that task force has continued to meet, is finalizing some recommendations. That's really focused more on the mid to long-term recovery plans, how we can pick back up where we left off. We've heard all of us talk about the moment that we have had here in this community, where we've really turned the corner in our local and regional economy. We expect that to continue as we begin to come out of that. All of the ingredients that existed before this crisis still exist, and in some ways have been strengthened and hardened by this process. And so we are preparing when it's safe to reopen, to pick up where we left off. And that's a lot of what the task force is focused on, as is the Regional Economic Development Council. The county executive and I are ex officio members of the council. We stay in regular touch with them, and of course they are working very closely with the governor's team. And all of those pieces are in place to help us pick back up where we left off. As we talk about restart and reopening, again, on a regional level, and not just the Central New York region, along with the Mohawk Valley, really led by County Executive McMahon, we've convened a number of county executives and city mayors, village mayors that have come together to help inform that restart plan. And now we have, with the governor's leadership, the New York Forward Reopening Advisory Group. And I was thrilled to see 4 good friends and great leaders in our community representing our region on that advisory group. We have Fanny Villarreal from the YWCA, Linda Brown Robinson, a friend from the NAACP, Joni Mahoney, of course, our former county executive, now at SUNY ESF, and Melanie Littlejohn, who is at National Grid and also the board chair at Center State CEO. So as we continue to fold up our local and regional work into the overall state process, we continue to be in lockstep among leadership that we are going to continue to have the health data drive our decision making, but we are going to work towards coming out of this, and when we do, pick up where we left off and continue to move this economy and this community forward. Before I open it up to questions, we do have Superintendent Alicea here. We did get some significant information from the governor, so we thought we'd give the superintendent an opportunity to talk a little bit about that, and then we'll open it up.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Mayor, for inviting me to join you this afternoon. As the Mayor announced at the beginning of the conference, the Governor announced that the schools will remain closed for the remainder of the year. That doesn't mean that our kids are not going to do any work. We will continue to do work with our students using online services, using the WCNY programming that we're doing, and also delivering packets to our students. We would love to have our students back, but we understand that we need to keep our community safe. So we agree that at this time, that's one of the best decisions that the governor made to keep the schools closed for the remainder of the year. He talks about having a reentry committee. We already have a reentry committee in the Syracuse City School District that is looking at the social and emotional of our students and our families, is looking at the social and emotional for the staff, looking at the academics, and looking at the operations and the finance for the school district. As the mayor announced, the school district also will be facing a difficult financial situation. So we're putting all our thoughts together so we can continue to provide our students and our families the best services that we can in the Syracuse School District. Because we're going to be closed until the end of the school year. We have a task force also that is looking at the graduation for our high school seniors, whether it's going to be a virtual graduation or whether there's going to be another vehicle that we can use to celebrate the hard work and the success of our students. So I would like to thank the mayor for inviting me, and thank you for being here.
Thank you, Jaime. At this point, I want to acknowledge and thank our interpreters. They are working very hard these days, and we promised them that we would get them out of here in time to get over to the county executives briefing. So at whatever point they need to go, they can go. And again, thank you all. I don't want to keep any of the media from the county exec's briefing as well. So that said, happy to answer any questions that you have.
Mayor, on the furloughs, how much are you expecting that to save?
So we've calculated it'll save somewhere between $20 $20,000 to $30,000 per week.
And it's 12 weeks for now?
Right now we have through July, but again, it'll depend on when we start to go back.
So that seems like a drop in the bucket compared to what you're facing right now. What other measures are you going to have to take?
Well, again, we talked about the unpaid leave, and we have a significant challenge. We have to start somewhere, and that's one of the areas where we're starting. But to your point, without significant federal aid, there's a lot more difficult decisions to come. So we talked about, as we close out the fiscal year, freezing non-essential spending. We've yet to fully quantify that, but that could be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. But more difficult decisions to come as we continue to advocate for additional assistance.
Mayor, for those who maybe don't speak government, can you explain what non-essential spending is? Like, give some examples of what that is, how much it'll save?
Yeah, certain consumables, food, supplies, things that are nice to haves but not have to haves that we try to budget for. Each department has budget lines that are associated that account for those types of purchases. So things like that.
And what would the next round of cuts look like if relief isn't here, let's say 2, 3, 4 weeks? It's a difficult decision. What are some examples of what those difficult decisions would be?
Well, again, that's why we've assembled the financial contingency committee to look at those possibilities. But I had mentioned specifically that staffing levels and service levels are at risk.
Mayor, how do you see this impacting the police department's budget and the fire department's budget? Obviously, the police contract was something that was already an issue that we discussed a lot. I know that you guys have talked about a lot. So how do you see this being impacted going forward?
Yeah, those are things that we're still looking at. When we put our budget together, I want to remind everyone that we didn't put it together not anticipating a negative financial impact associated with the crisis. We accounted for that based on what we knew at that point in the budget that we compiled. As we accounted for that, we were still able to hold staffing levels and service levels firm in the budget. So as we look at the ongoing financial impact, we're going to have to look at where else we might be able to achieve savings. But it's a delicate balance. When you start to eat away at staffing levels and service levels, that foundation that I talked about in our community, that starts to crack. And at what point do those cracks become counterproductive, and we actually amplify or accelerate the negative impacts from this crisis? So that's why we have to look at not only those cuts, but where else might we be able to generate revenue. And again, it's too early to tell where we'll end up yet. Again, I think what we've done right now is what we will is probably what we'll be able to do for fiscal year 20. And again, the fact that we had budgeted for about an $8 million deficit, we were trending for $1.5 million surplus. So the good news is, we were starting from a positive, but we will end up drawing from the reserves. But it's fiscal year 21 without any additional aid that those difficult decisions really come home to roost. I do want to mention on the federal aid. I'm following it as closely as anyone. I know a lot of others are as well. I am hopeful. We've seen some mixed messages coming out of Washington, but I've heard from a lot more people that have acknowledged the need for local government aid, including the president. Now they've discussed what that negotiation might look like, at what cost it might come, but it is being discussed, and we have to plan for the worst but we're going to continue to hope for the best. I am again heartened and encouraged by our federal delegation, and I know that they're going to continue to work really hard on behalf of all of us to secure those resources. So this isn't a hope and a prayer. This is something that I'm cautiously optimistic about, but we would not be good stewards of taxpayer dollars if we didn't have contingency plans. So that's what we're going to be working on in the coming weeks. And even with the budget, the council, I'm sure will have more to say on it next week. The budget it's a plan. It's a best guess, and every budget is wrong every year. I think we anticipate that this year it's even more likely to be, because things are going to continue to change. And while they may change for the worse, it could change for the better. So I think we have to, manage our expectations both ways and plan for both.
So right now, those significant cuts that are set in stone.
Correct. Other than the 104 employees that we talked about, no other decisions have been made as it relates to staffing in the city.
And there's the other end of things. We reach that time of the year when there's going to be a lot of festivals in the square area. You're going to have a lot of overtime with police. Is that something that you take into account, that savings that you actually get, not having to keep them there, not having to have city employees there for these events?
It's a good point. There are some savings that have been achieved by certain activities and certain programs not happening. We've yet to quantify those, but they will exist in certain areas.
Can you consider pay cuts for yourself and other top members of your administration?
We haven't had any specific discussions about pay cuts. I think that'll be part of the contingency plan process, where we look at that along with everything else. There are no good options here. I think everything has to be on the table.
Can you talk more about the reopening plan? Like, what specifics do you have? What areas do you think will be reopened first? And does this begin on May 15th?
Well, the governor's made it clear that May 15th is the first point that reopening is possible. He's also made it clear that based on current case rates, that Central New York, North Country, Mohawk Valley are in the best position to reopen. But until we get to that point, we won't know, based on the benchmarks that the state has laid out, whether or not we'll be in a position to move forward. He's looking at the retransmission rate. That's an important new metric that we hadn't been looking at. Then there are the ones that we are very much aware of: hospital bed capacity, PPE capacity and supply. Those are all, the state has clearly laid out what those benchmarks are, and now we just have to track our data towards those benchmarks to make that determination, and also begin to continue to prioritize what industries open first. The governor's made it clear that manufacturing and construction are the most likely to start first. I think that makes sense. Last week I talked about manufacturing, the fact that 80% of our manufacturers in the region are already operating, not at full capacity, but they are based on their essential work. So what have they done to operate safely currently, and how can they implement those health and safety precautions for the 80% to get to full capacity, and for that 20% that's not currently operating to begin operating. Similarly with construction, a lot of construction continues to take place. One very positive note on the school district front is our joint school construction board projects, or JSCB school projects, continue to move forward. You can see goalposts up on the Fowler Field now on South Data Street. So there is quite a lot of work, and you saw it in the permits that we're issuing. There's a lot of work going on now. Things are happening. We're doing this briefing, practicing social distancing, wearing masks. There are ways to do it, but health and safety have to be priority number one, and I know they are for me, for the county executive, for everyone that I serve with at the city, and for the governor as well.
You had a decent amount of protesters outside City Hall who were saying it's going too slow,
Yeah.
and that things need to speed up and reopen soon.
Well, I was glad to see that most of them were wearing masks, and that is their right. That's what makes this country a special place. Everyone has the right to voice their opinion, and that's what they were doing out there, and there's nothing wrong with that.
again, I had to agree with that decision to keep the schools closed, but we need to make sure that we're ready when the kids are ready to come back, that we have a plan that will detail everything that we're gonna do for our kids, for our staff, and for our families. I did receive a phone call today from a parent who said, what are you gonna do for us? As a parent, as we continue to work with our kids, and we continue to work with you to support. So we have a group of staff members that is looking at that. We're working with the county to provide support for our families, and we need to make sure that we have everything ready. We have lent a lot of computers out, so we gotta make sure that that equipment returns to us, and that when the kids return back in September, we have all the equipment that we need to provide the instruction that they deserve.
How much did you lend out? How many computers did you lend out?
Already we have about 1,600, and then this week we will have another 1,000 going out and more next week.
Superintendent, I imagine you have to get creative with a lot of things. I know that for the people that are graduating this year, you know, this has been kind of a lost year. Have you thought about creative options to maybe try and have some sort of graduation? Maybe break it up alphabetically, have it like maybe groups of 20 at a time to come in and have some sort of graduation besides the virtual one?
We are, like I said at the beginning, we have a task force that is looking at graduation, how we're gonna do it. The principals and the kids have been very creative, giving us suggestions that maybe, you know, the principal and the superintendent and the president of the board can stand in front of the building, and they can parade in front of the buildings in their cars and give them their diploma. So we're looking at different options to make sure that we celebrate their hard work.
How is the distance learning going?
It's going well. Yesterday, when we check our numbers, the people that are using online services, there were 72% of the kids that yesterday checked on that. We're also sending packets home to our families, and the feedback that we're getting about the programming that we're offering through WCNY is going well. So it's something that our parents are very thankful, because we're also sending packets to them with information that they can use for those programs. So it's going well. Our teachers are working very hard. I have to give them credit because they had to be very creative in a short amount of time.
Are you expecting a high graduation rate this year?
We're working on it. I am.
And that task force, it's also, are they creating a plan to enforce social distancing protocols for the students when they return next year and other safety protocols?
Yes, the task force is looking at that, at social distancing within the building. So some of the discussions that the governor is having up and other people is that we cannot use the cafeteria, we cannot use other areas in the building. So we are looking at all that, the social distancing in the building, whether it's gonna be every day, whether it's gonna be an alternate day, so we will have a program. Also, the state education department sent an email on Wednesday that they're also gonna have a task force that is going to look at re-entry plans. So our plans will have to be in alignment with the guidance from the state education department.
Mayor, if I can go back to the budget review briefly.
Sure.
So your proposed budget had, I think, $14 million.
Yeah, 13.9 million. They're on reserve.
If I'm looking at the numbers you're saying today, we're talking about around roughly $28 million less than initially projected in next year's budget, coming between state aid and county sales tax. We're probably going to need to use more of the rainy day fund than initially projected in your budget. Do you have a limit that we are going to be able to go up to?
So first, that we're making some assumptions that we, of course, need to plan for, but we don't know are happening yet. One example being the state cut. But assuming that happens, I believe, based on my conversations with the council, I think we are generally in agreement that we are wary to rely much more, if at all, on our fund balance this year, especially not knowing what happens, what's happening in the future. So that's ultimately something at this point that the council is going to have to make a decision on next week on the budget. But that's why we're looking at the contingency spending plans, because I think my perspective is we can use the we can use reserves to mitigate some of that impact, but we need to protect it as much as possible and try to make up for it in additional spending cuts.
So you're not willing to increase the amount of work taken from the.
I'm open to discussions about that, but that's it's not a sustainable solution, so not something that that would be my first choice. But again, this is a collaborative process, and I want to hear the council's thoughts on that. We've been talking about it, and we'll talk more about it. So we'll know more next week. I'll make sure everybody gets over to the Civic Center who's heading over. Thank you all for coming over. Thanks for taking the time, and stay healthy and be safe.
Beautiful cadence, very interpretable, thank you. Wow, you did really good. I was right